Just waiting for them to join.
Hi everybody, just waiting for people to join.
I can see the people coming in now, so.
Perfect.
Yeah, they're not going up slowly but surely.
We hit go, Ben?
Yeah, it's sharing now.
Perfect. So if you guys want me to pop yourselves on mute, and I'll do some intros in a second.
Sure.
Just waiting for a few more people to join. Just give it a few more minutes, another minute maybe. Okay, well, I might get started if that's all right. And I think if other people are sort of joining, they can kind of catch up. Hello and welcome to our webinar today. This is around accelerating your web presence, and we'll do some intros in a moment. Just kind of before we started, there's a chat function on the right-hand side, and also a function to ask questions. And you can ask questions for the whole webinar, or you can ask individual panelists as well. So if you've got anything that you particularly want to get out of today, do pop it in the chat, and then we've got access to that, and we can take a look and see if we can answer your questions and queries as we're presenting. So, but without further ado, I'll get started. Ben, if you want to click over. So today you're going to hear from the three of us, and we're going to be all taking a different aspect of web design, SEO and social media, and with the aim to give you guys a bit of a foundation, and also some tangible things that you can kind of action around accelerating your web presence. Next, thank you. So this is me, looking slightly younger in the photo. So I'm the director at Make It Clear, and I'm a user experience consultant. I've been kind of working in that area for about 15 years. Next slide, a bit more interesting, I would hope. And Make It Clear, so we're a London-based service design agency, really are a design agency, and we focus on user interface design and UX design with a strong kind of angle on research. We don't do development, hence George, and we also don't do what I would call traditional marketing these days, so PPC and SEO and sort of social kind of campaigns. So hence why we've all kind of come together to deliver today. So I'm really looking forward to speaking, and I'm going to hand over to George. Oh, I think you're mute, George.
Sorry. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm George. I've been in tech for about 10, 11 years plus. I'm currently the CEO of HostHelp, which is a digital growth partner. We help businesses start, build, and scale. And what that looks like is we help with domains hosting, we help with logo and branding, website, SEO, and then email marketing. We do and don't do UX again, like what Sarah said, hence why she's here, and also similar, we don't do any paid ads or social media offering, which is why, again, Joe's here. And yeah, that's kind of a bit about me. I've worked at some big corporates. I've worked with IBM, I've worked with Nationwide, Sainsbury's, etc. And I've been in business around the same amount of time as well. Yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. I'll hand over to Joe.
Okay, so my name's Joe. To give you the really brief story of it, I started making YouTube videos when I was about 13 years old. And I grew a personal brand using social media, Twitter, Instagram, all of those kinds of things. And skip forwards now, 8 or 9 years later, what I've done is I've taken those skills that I learned when I was, actually not 8 or 9 years later, that's now 13 years later. Sorry, I forget my age, but skip forward that many years, and this is now what we're helping people do. We're helping people grow brands, grow businesses using online platforms through social media, through paid advertising, all of those kinds of things. Yeah, I think you can go to the next slide. I think I've kind of mentioned about what it is that we do. The premise of what it is that we do is marketing management. So trying to help people look after everything. There are so many different things that fall underneath marketing that it just kind of becomes a little bit overwhelming sometimes. And sometimes people don't know what they need to do, right? And so that's kind of where we come in, and we can advise people, tell them they should be doing this or that, and then help them carry it out as well. So yeah, that's a bit about us.
Thanks. So I'm going to take the first few sections, and I hope you find it interesting. Do pop any questions in. So initially, we're going to talk just a little bit of an introduction around user experience design and the principles that it has. I just wanted to talk about how important it is, because just by simply improving those customer journeys, you can really increase customer satisfaction, and that equates to better journeys and then often sort of higher conversions as well. So it has a real financial impact. There's a good stat from Think with Google, around 64% of online retail traffic coming from mobile, yet conversion rates on mobile are only half of that of desktop. So if you could really optimize that mobile experience, think about what you can do. So what is UX and why is it important? So user experience, or UX as we call it, it focuses on having a really deep understanding of your users or your customers and your audience, and really what they need and what they value, what their abilities are, and also what their limitations. And I think this image is always a really good explanation of kind of design versus user experience, because the way you design your site might be a certain way, but the way your users use it might be completely different. So having a really good understanding of who those users are, how they want to use your product, your service, your website, kind of gives you a really good head start. So a little kind of poll to begin with. I won't ask you to vote, but do keep your answer in your head. So the first thing we're looking at is like a header of a website. Now, do we think that A or B performed better? We can flick to the answer. So it's actually the version without the icons perform better. So this is a really nice principle around user experience design, that sometimes simplicity is better. So we don't add iconography and images, or in fact any UI elements, if we don't have to, and that really helps support the journey. Next one. Okay, and next little quiz. So do we think the form A or form B performed better? So it's actually B, because if you look closely at the form, it's not actually a purchase journey there, and it was the wrong logo that was used. And if users are looking at the wrong logo at the wrong part of the journey, then they're going to lose trust in that journey, and that loss of trust maybe, and that would basically mean that they wouldn't continue. So just a couple of terms you might hear kind of bandied about when you're thinking about user experience. So we have user experience and user interface design, both terms that you may hear when you're kind of working on your products or your services, or you're designing your website. And UX is really about research and analysis. It's it's user research, it's design ideation, things like wireframes and prototypes, and it's also kind of really about talking and understanding your users. So often a lot of this is kind of written research. It doesn't even involve kind of color palettes or anything. And the next slide, UI design or user interface design. So this is all about the look and feel of your website. And I think it's always really important to think of the two things as different entities. And when thinking about UI, it doesn't mean it's less important than UX, but often people jump straight into the UI. What's the look and feel going to be? So it is really important to, I think about the experience of the user as well. And then the UI will kind of complement all of that work and help bring it to life. That's when you add your logos, your color palettes, your interactions. Next slide. And some of the types of UX research we might use. So we normally split that into qualitative and quantitative. So qualitative is something that's based on sentiment. So that might be an interview or a focus group. And quantitative are things that are kind of based around numbers. So that might be A/B testing. So the small test that we did earlier, or the little quiz that we did earlier, that's an example of A/B testing. So there'll be two things that are put out into the world, and we'll see basically which one performs the best. Little section now around kind of understanding your user, and we're just going to go through a couple of techniques that we use, and we'll also talk about things that you can do yourselves. So question really is, if you've created a user persona before, you may have done, you may not. So what are personas? So when we're talking about a persona, that is an idea of your target audience. And user personas, user profiles, or sometimes it's called segmentation. It's used both in user experience design and also in marketing as well. Because if we've got a strong idea of who we need to target and what they care about, then we can really tailor that marketing specifically at that user base. So these are the kind of things that you might find as part of a persona. You'd be looking at some demographic information, name and age. You also be looking at what they like and their goals, their motivations. But I find the most interesting is around the challenges and pain points, because if we can talk to those pain points, then we can often really speak directly to a user. There's lots of benefits of creating a user persona, and I would really advise everybody listening to have a think about kind of who their user base or their audience or their customer base is. It really gives you that thorough understanding. It helps you make decisions faster, and it also helps people within your organization have a greater understanding of your users. The other thing is it creates a nice shared vocabulary. So if we're thinking about Bob, who's a plumber, then when we're talking about that type of person, we always refer to them as Bob. And it also helps challenge teams' own perceived ideas of how users might behave, because it's human nature to think that everybody's going to be using an interface or a website exactly like you are, and that's not really true. You know, your user is a different person. They will have different motivations from yourself, so you shouldn't really use your own experiences, because you're often not the target. So when to create personas? Ideally as soon as possible, but it's never really too late. You know, even if you have like a website in play at the moment, or you have a product, I would always advise kind of going back and having a look at the persona information, and also to kind of revisiting it, because people change, audiences change, their motivations and their needs change. So what types of projects our personas might be useful for? So thinking about how a product can be used, and also understanding how users might interact and engage with services. And on top of that, we can use personas to identify new products or services or features and improve the ones that exist as well. So they are really powerful tools. But how do you create it? Okay, so it's kind of like a 4-step process. Well, it is a 4-step process. We'll skip over to the next one. So first thing is around kind of really understanding and uncovering your audiences. So finding out who those groups of users are. And there's a few techniques you can use to do that. Could put a short survey on your website, and that could ask people, you know, are you this type of person, this type of person, or why are you here? You can also do a little bit of social listening. So take a look at their social accounts and understand kind of who might be talking about you and your business. Ask existing customers, or if you've got a database of existing customers, it's a good exercise to sort of dig that out. You know, are there typical job titles or typical companies that are using your products and services? Also discuss with key stakeholders, especially internally. If you've got anybody that's working in customer customer service capacity, they're always great people to kind of ask, you know, who has got the most issues here, who are we kind of marketing to, any existing data. And the last one I have is AI. So ChatGPT is actually pretty good, unfortunately, because it's kind of putting us a little bit out of a job, at helping define with a couple of sentences who your target audience would be. If there's one tip I'd say to kind of do after this webinar, it'd be go to ChatGPT, hopefully you use it already, describe briefly what your company is, and then ask it to identify some target customer groups. And then you can turn those into profiles. And you know, we do this quite regularly as a very quick initial step, and then we use that information and look to prove or disprove the information that is brought up. It's a quick and easy tool. It gives you some really interesting insight, but do speak to your actual audience as well. And this is the step where we want to do that. So you've gathered like an idea of who the audience is. Now is the chance to really kind of go out there and talk to them, because the process of meeting and talking and speaking to people that you that you're looking to engage is absolutely kind of priceless. Often when we're doing this kind of exercise with clients, we encourage them to be part of this research as well, because it gives them a really first-hand understanding of their customers and their pain points, and it stops them being a line on a spreadsheet that's like a customer you know, a query or a complaint, and it makes them into a real person with a real problem. So there's some techniques you can do that, but you can do it really cheap, you know, really cheaply. Just, you know, find somebody you think, oh, that's a good target, you know, just can I have like just 20 minutes of your time just to ask you a few questions. You can do that in person, you can do that with a survey over the internet, you can do some more social listening to understand what people are saying. Yeah. And then, so based on all that information that you've put together, what we do is we group that into a certain structure, and that structure is really different depending on what kind of organization you are and how you want to use this information. So typically we might think about sort of typical demographic data, so it's just name, age and role, and then we might have a short story about a type of person. We'd be looking at behaviors, touch points, motivations, and possibly the journey that they're going to be taking on the website. It's also important to state that, you know, you don't want, some users are probably more relevant to the purchase journey or more relevant to the website journey than others. So do bear that in mind. Then there's a chance to kind of bring those to life. A few examples here of how we've done that. Keep the design to a minimum. If you can, do it in a format that is editable and you can update, so something that's online, because this information does change. You want to be revisiting it. So having it as a poster on a wall is a nice idea and it brings it front of mind, but you also want something that's not going to be out of date within 3 months. The key then, I think, within larger organizations is really embedding personas into your team's processes. I think, you know, we talked before about involving your team as part of the process. Presenting this information back to the whole organization, that's a really valuable exercise as well, with any additional kind of context or evidence that might need to be put in place. And reinforcing that the personas should be thought about when we think about each new marketing campaign, each new feature we're going to be using on our website. They really should be the kind of the core of the approach of how you're kind of going to market. What makes a good persona? So they've got to be believable. You've got to have, you know, you've got to have an idea that, you know, oh, you know, I know somebody like that, and they must be kind of evidence-led. So the more that you can draw it from real user experience and real first-hand user research, the better. The more plausible they are, the more the team are going to kind of embed them and, you know, think about them as part of the process. They should be used to support decision making. You know, we should think about them as another member of the team. So when we're running a campaign or designing a feature, as I mentioned, this is a really important point, probably said earlier, but avoid creating too many personas. I think you can think about your audience and say, oh, you know, I've got about, you know, 20 different types of people. it's going to be really hard to design a product or a marketing campaign that's going to target that many people. So really think about keeping it about sort of 3 to 5 kind of groups. And sometimes if we're doing this work, we might document 3 because we know that they're going to be the 3 most important for the buying journey. But we might reference other people that are going to influence either the marketing or the design. So for example, it might be an internal audience that is an important kind of stakeholder, but we don't actually want to kind of create the persona because the website is directed primarily at the buyers. So try and keep them up to date. They shouldn't be a static resource, and they really need to represent those real people, and that does change over time. And the more you learn, it's good to kind of add more kind of context as well. So one thing that I think I think George's going to be talking about SEO later. So we sometimes add kind of like key search terms and places that they go to find information as well. So you can really layer a level of SEO insight over the top of personas, and that's a really nice thing to do. So I'm going to just touch a couple of slides around accessibility. I wanted to feature this because it's a really big part of our agency makeup. We've really been focusing on it quite a lot over the last few years because it's really important, and it's a lot more prevalent than you would think. We've got 12% of the global population that have dyslexia. So when we're thinking about how we're writing content for our website, keeping the language in an understandable formats is really important. And there's other things that we can also do around font choices, contrast, and things like that help kind of support that kind of dyslexic audience. And we've also got 1.3 billion people with a significant disability. And an aging population. We've got 18.6 people are 65 plus years old in the UK, and 500k people are over 90. And one of our jobs is to make technology and make our products and our services, our companies, more accessible to those audiences. So we really do need to try and think about them in those in the design process. This is a really important thing to bear in mind, I think, when we're thinking about accessibility. That not all disabilities are permanent. A disability could be permanent, it can be temporary, or it can be situational. So if we think about someone with a hearing impairment, I mean, that could be because they're permanently deaf, or it could be that they have a temporary ear infection, or it just could be a very loud environment that they're in when they're using your product or your service. So when we're thinking about accessibility kind of as a whole, it makes our designs more accessible kind of across the board. And we're not just always thinking about that permanent piece, we're also thinking about when are people going to be using in a situational context. So the legislation that goes behind accessibility and across websites is from an organisation called W3C. So we have, I'm just going to get my notes up for this one. We are currently on the iteration of this guidance, which is 2.1. And these guidelines provide us like a set of principles that we should adhere to when we're thinking about how we design websites, but also how we code websites as well. So it's things like what color contrast, making sure that people can kind of pick out the text, making sure that font sizes are big enough. One thing I think it gets forgotten is line lengths. So you should only really have about 80 characters on a line, because any longer, then that makes it really hard for a user to kind of scan. And these principles are kind of a real foundation for how kind of websites are built. They're only advisory. I mean, at the moment, there's a chance that these kind of things could come built into law. And there's an update to this coming up. So I think this is very imminent, apparently possibly even September, version 2.2 will be coming out. And that's going to be kind of important. It's going to talk a lot about more mobile principles as well. So nothing is more fashionable than inclusivity. So that's a quote. British Vogue did some brilliant work on these cover stars in May 2023. And accessibility is really coming into vogue, I suppose. It's when we're thinking about how individual users with individual accessibility needs are using our websites, and you know, we're talking about that, then I think that really does make us better organizations. And as I say, it makes it more kind of accessible for everybody. Here's an example about how you can take some of that persona work and think about it in an accessibility context. So depending on your kind of use case, it might be applicable for you to do an accessibility persona. So this is one we've actually borrowed from the RNIB website. So it's Maureen who has low sight, and we can create personas that talk to her individual needs. So when we're setting up products and services that she might need to use, we can be thinking about exactly how those services are going to be working for her. Images. So this is a really interesting one about thinking about when you're going to be using images and being mindful of how you're using images. So sometimes images, if they're used without context, they can be quite distracting. So don't use an image if you don't have to. And the other thing is about adding alt text. So when you're adding images within your CMS, you would have the ability to add alt text in, which is what a screen reader will read if somebody can't see the image. Now, it's actually really good for SEO. And also, it's if you can provide something that's very descriptive as well, and not just picture of a panel, you know, it actually gives you kind of good context. And as I say, it's got a good SEO value at the same time. And I think the last one we're going to think about is video and animation. So sometimes, especially for neurodiversity, animation and video can be quite distracting. So when you're building animation and video into your websites, it's really good practice to not autoplay, and also to give the ability to be able to turn that animation off so that people don't necessarily have to see it. And when you're looking at video content, when you're putting that in as well, nearly there, then you want to be thinking about making sure that it's your subtitles. Anyway, that's the end of my section. Do pop any questions in the chat, and I think I'm handing over to yes, George. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Sarah. As you said that, I realized the last thing you mentioned about video animation, I realized that I need to go and make a change to my website because I've got autoplay on the video. I need to make that change as soon as possible. But yeah, no, that was very insightful. I'm going to definitely be looking back over those slides as well. Very helpful. So we're now going to talk about SEO, and I'm obviously going to be I guess quite focused on how we perform SEO, because that's how we've learned how to do it. I've been doing that since maybe 2017, before I actually applied it to HostHelp. So there's 5 main phases of SEO that make up our SEO services and what actually make up SEO in general. So we're looking at keyword research, which is basically you understanding, and how I like to put it is, in your industry, there's going to be keywords that people will search for that are relevant to your business. So for example, we have a client that is a brewery, and the keywords that's relevant to them is people searching for tap rooms, people searching for brewery, people searching for beer and pizza. These are keywords that are relevant to them. In that keyword research process, what we will do is essentially break those keywords down. So we always go for the top level keywords, which are, I guess, the high competition keywords. We then break those down into longer tail keywords. So an example of a longer tail keyword in that brewery example is someone searching for tap rooms near me, tap rooms in London, tap rooms in a certain location, or where is the best pizza, where is the best beer, etc., etc. And it kind of goes on in that way. When performing keyword research, there's tools that you can use. So some people use Ahrefs, some people use SEMrush. We have our own keyword research tool as well called SEO Studio, and also our on-page SEO auditor is called SEO Rank. And all of these tools can help you actually do that same keyword research. I guess keyword research holistically shouldn't just be for Google, it should also be for Bing and other search engine providers. The main reason being is everybody kind of focuses on Google because they are the search engine that everybody understands and knows. But don't forget that people actually use Bing, Yahoo, MSN, etc., because some people just prefer those to Google. One of the things that I've seen from speaking to a lot of businesses is that they don't even realize that they're not indexed on those other search engines, which means they're losing some traffic as well, which is quite important. Once keyword research is done, you should actually start looking at ways to implement these keywords into your website. So one of the easiest ways to implement this is kind of around title tags, page tags, which are basically, when you go to a website, you will see like if you search a website, I don't know, let's say you're searching for Sony or something, or PlayStation or whatever, there'll be a longer tag assigned to that. So there'll be like hyphen PlayStation 1 or whatever will be next to it. That's the title tag, and you can have those for different pages as well. Another kind of like quick win when it comes to on-page optimization is blogs. So when you're creating blogs, you can actually put those keywords in, the longer tail keywords, as your blog titles, which then makes it, if somebody is searching for something related to that keyword, they'll find your blog, which then they find your website, which then you can create a lead, which is kind of like a step-by-step process almost at that point. And this is quite important because you want to be able to target all the keywords that's relevant within your industry, because each keyword has its own difficulty, it has its own traffic, and also has its own, I guess, revenue value, which is something that is also quite important. So you can have, and that revenue value is kind of based on what the quality of traffic is. So Google search engines kind of congregate and obviously take a lot of information from everybody searching and whatnot. That they kind of follow you around based on where you are going on different sites. They see a certain level of understanding what your search is, what your buying power is. That then kind of forms a traffic or transaction value for certain keywords, which then, kind of grades the difficulty, etc. I'm sure Joe will talk more about what those keyword values look like when he talks about paid ads as well. So once on-page optimization is done and you've kind of fed in the keywords into your content on your website already, your title tags, your meta descriptions, which is just a description of what each page is, those two main processes, those two phases, keyword and on-page, just feeds the algorithm. So Google obviously has an algorithm that it uses to search websites and kind of rank sites. The more information you have about what you do, what business you are, what services you provide on your website, the more easier it is for Google to rank you respectively for the keywords that you're going for. And I'll touch a bit more in the next couple of phases about how to improve your trust score with Google, etc., etc. So once this has been done, we then, before we even take on a client, we basically do a full website audit, looking at all the technical issues, etc. Because once we've done the keyword research and then we've actually sent the recommendation of the keywords that we would like to implement, we then go straight into doing technical optimization, which are things like you may have broken links within your website. And a broken link is just simply your main site, for example, is linking to a blog that you've written. That blog is no longer available. You haven't updated that link. That's a broken link. All of these links Google searches as well. And one of the main reasons why Google looks at broken links and errors within your site is to know if you are actually still running and operating that website. So as regularly as you can, you should be updating your website and checking these things and improving your technical site score, because that shows Google that you are serious about your website, you pay attention to it, etc., etc. Again, these are all these processes are still part of you feeding the algorithm, making Google understand that you are serious about your business and you're actually a serious business. One bonus tip that I actually want to mention is that one of the weird factors that Google looks for is how long you've paid for your domain. So it's weird, but no one really talks about it. But basically, if you have a domain that you've paid for 10 years, for example, Google will favor you over another company that's only paid for 1 year, because it shows Google that you're in it for the long term. So that's a random fact that people don't really speak about. So with the keyword research, and the next phase that we would go into after those three is content marketing strategies. And what that looks like is based on all the keywords that you would have gathered anyway during that process, and that's why that process is actually the backbone of SEO, is that you then, one of the main things about that keyword research process is you can also look at your competitors and see what keywords that they're ranking for, mainly because it just kind of helps you understand your industry better. So maybe gather maybe 2 or 3 other competitors that you have, search what they're ranking for, what kind of content they're producing, what's working well. All this information is available for you through those platforms that I mentioned. And then that will help you build your content marketing strategy. That can look at different things. So you can have blogs, you can look at videos. One of the things that I'm seeing more and more within the landscape is video content. Is getting more and more important to have video content and pumping out video content. It's kind of going back to the whole YouTube era of actually creating videos, making sure that you're doing explainer videos. One thing that TikTok has done is lowered attention spans further, but obviously depending on your audience, you may be able to still capture them with longer content. But with your content marketing strategy, you want to look at long form content and short form content as well. Mainly because, again, different people do different things. You can have longer videos, so you can have a 10-minute video, for example, explaining one of your services or providing value, and then you can have a 1-minute version of that video that just touches on the key points, and then you can say, watch the longer video, etc., etc. So paying attention to those things matter as well. Obviously, the social media strategy is also important, but that's not my field. So I'll leave that to Joe when that comes. But yeah, that is also important. So your social media, your website, your, I guess, video content side of things as well are all pieces that you want to include within this process. So just an example, when we're building funnels for clients through our email marketing side of things, we look at brand building exercises. So we look at being able to create brand familiarity. So if you start sending, for example, if you start sending emails to somebody they don't know who you are, but the more that they see you in their inbox, we then have a team that kind of goes out and retargets those people through different means, whether it's going to get on the phone, whether it's like a different type of medium of connecting with that person, social media, LinkedIn, etc. We then find ways to re-engage with that person just to increase the brand familiarity, which then helps create sales at the end. So having that cohesive content marketing strategy across all your channels is very important. One of the things that I do want to mention is everyone that starts a business now essentially also starts a media business, which is the content side. So it's very important to make sure that that content side stays fresh. The next phase after you've done all of those bits is looking at off-page SEO. This ties into quite a bit of the overall strategy and why it's very important to have this strategy. Is off-page SEO is basically, let's say, for example, I am a roofing business. I do roofs, etc. I've then done some work for you. You have a website. You've then spoken about me on your website and linked to my site. That immediately shows Google that, okay, you've got a backlink or someone giving you some positive feedback. That must mean that you are relevant to those same keywords that you are targeting. We will start bumping you up for those respective keywords. The more backlinks you have that are obviously higher quality and higher authority, those two kind of tie back to a Google trust score. So every website has a trust score, which is called domain authority. These trust scores rank between 0 to 100. Websites like Amazon, etc., have like a 99 because they've got like millions of backlinks. So for a new company, if you started a new website, you will have 0 backlinks. So which will mean that you now need to kind of go and build trust through linking to different websites, which are like blog pages, forums, different high authority things like PR is very good. So if you are getting PR through Telegraph, Daily Mirror, etc., those are high authority ranking domains, which will then also improve your trust score The reason why trust score is so important is because the higher trust score you have, the easier and quicker it is for you to rank for a keyword. So just to give an example, we've had new clients that's come on to us that's started with a trust score of 0. For them to rank for keywords takes slightly longer, can take over 90 days for them to rank for those keywords, because we need to then build up their trust score in order for Google to accept them. We've then had a bigger client that's come to us with a trust score of about 40 to 50, and they have ranked for keywords within a month, and they ranked for like 20 plus keywords pretty quickly, because Google, they've already got a trust score with Google. Google understands them, they know what they do. As soon as they start adding new keywords, they can have thousands and thousands of keywords rank quite quickly because of that trust score, which is very important. And for us, something that's quite unique about us is we also have quite a different approach when it comes to local SEO. So we've got like communities and communities of, I guess, search directories, which is like traditional yellow pages. So we've built a network of these. And through that, we've been able to have about 5,000 plus keywords ranking on first page because of this. So what we tend to do is start creating microsites of your business, essentially. And then with those microsites, we still have like certain keywords that we then target, which are mainly the highly competitive ones. Those create search traffic for you. Because those keywords are already ranking for highly competitive keywords already, it's easier for us to kind of drive that traffic back to your website. And all that really does is just help you rank for your local SEO side of things. So say, for example, you are a corner shop in the corner of Whitechapel, for example. You want to be found when people are searching for groceries or whatever it is that they're searching for. We get you, we obviously go through this process. We then add this kind of like a bonus turbocharger that then gets you ranking quite quickly for that local keyword. That's what that really is. But it's quite unique to us because, but as far as I know currently, and from my research, no other company provides that. And it's quite unique to us at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of it for me. Yeah, I'm happy to hand over to Joe because I'm looking forward to see what he's going to talk about.
Okay, so if you want to skip, so this is primarily going to be focused on, or it is going to be focused on social media, specifically partly paid, partly content driven. So if you want to skip to the next page. So as if you didn't already know how big social media was, I know that seems like an obvious statistic to tell you, but in 2023, there are estimated to be 4.89 billion people on social media. That is a huge, so over half of the entire planet is on social media. So if you know, like what Sarah was talking about with your personas, and I will touch on that as well in a moment, which is funny. If you know who you're trying to target, I guarantee you they're in that 4.89 billion people. So this is also something that's worth bearing in mind as well, and we'll also touch on this later, is that people don't just have one platform. Social media is a buzzword. Social media is broken down into so many different things, different platforms, all of these kinds of things. So the average person uses 7 of them, and that's just the average. You can imagine how many other people might use, right? So if you want to skip to the next slide. So in that today, what we're going to do is break it down into 5 principles of social media. So those principles are understanding your audience, content creation and curation, engagement and community building, paid advertising, and then at the end of all of it, reporting on it, seeing how it's done, return on investment, etc., etc. So if you go to the next slide, please. So first of all, understanding your audience. Very similar to what Sarah was talking about a lot in hers, because it ties in directly to that. And it is, if you're going to be posting out, essentially social media is pushing your own content out to new people. Before you start doing that, you have to know who it is that you're promoting it to. So what you have to do is do essentially what Sarah has said to you, right? And you create a persona. So I won't go too much into it, but it doesn't necessarily, even if you just wanted to start out and you don't have these personas yet, you can still sit there and quite easily figure out who it is that you're trying to target, even if it's done by the very, very basic things like the age, the gender, location, interests, those kinds of things. If you don't know who those people are roughly, then you should probably have a think about that. And most of you listening have probably already got to that point. So it's not only important that you know who you're trying to target, but it's also important that you know where those people are, where they reside. So there's I mentioned there's obviously loads of different social media platforms. There's way too many for us to sit and go through every single platform and who sits on what platform and does what and spends what amount of time. But a really extreme example is that if you have an entirely female audience for your business, then immediately Pinterest would be a go-to, because Pinterest has a very, very heavily female orientated user base. So, you know, obviously the opposite of that is if you have a very male orientated product or service, what you wouldn't do is worry about putting it on Pinterest. In most circumstances, you will probably be looking to focus on other platforms. So you know who you're targeting and who your audience is. You know where they are after you've thought about that. You know, these are all fairly self-explanatory things and things that you can find out. Now you need to think about creating content for those people on those platforms. Each platform has its own different style. Some platforms are more video orientated, some are more text orientated, some picture, some in between, all of these kinds of things. Not only that, but this is actually something that Sarah had said as well in hers, that, you know, and I say this so often to people, is that to assume that other people are like you is one of the biggest mistakes that you can make. Often what will happen is, as a business owner, you know, and I do this as well, I'm guilty of it, you know all of the things within your business. There are probably so many frequently asked questions or things that other people might want to know that you poo-poo the idea of or think that's not worth putting out because you already know it. But what you've got to remember is that the people who you're targeting to aren't you. So that's really, really, really important to remember. We can go to the next slide, please. So first of all, you've got to know who you're targeting, but it's all well and good knowing who you're targeting. And this, again, might sound like a really silly question, but how well do you know your own business and your own brand? So there's lots of different areas to this. Again, we've only got a sort of short amount of time for this webinar. Two of the primary things here are your brand voice, i.e. how you speak and how you sound, and your visual brand, how you look to people. So as far as brand voice goes, what you've got to do is write for your audience and not for yourself, not for your team or your business partners. Write for your audience. So a really, again, extreme example of this is if you're writing a text to your mum or your nan, you're going to write that probably in a very, very different way as to how you might write that to your best mate or your sister or friend or whatever. It's almost like it's going to be two totally different people. And you have to think of it like that. You know, if your audience is young and fun and quirky, then you wouldn't write an extremely formal piece of content because they're not going to read it. You would write something really casual. Likewise, if you're a business to business orientated, you know, in the financial sector, then you're probably not going to be writing like you're one of the lads, you know, having a joke. You're going to be writing it more seriously and more professionally. So that's really, it's again, a lot of what I'm saying might seem obvious, but actually go and look at what you've got on there and look at your website as well and look at your social media and read through it. Does that sound like what people who you're targeting want to read or not? And often the case is probably not, because you write it trying to be too perfect sometimes. As far as visual consistency goes, like I said, this is how you look. Now, far too often, if you look at a great example of this, if you look at an Instagram profile and you scroll down the profile, far too often businesses just post random things at random times that have no consistency. And if I were to just see one of those posts, I have no idea who it was without actually looking and reading the name, reading the caption, seeing who it was. The goal here is that you want people to know it's you without knowing it's you. So again, an example on the end of the spectrum, Apple. Everything that Apple do, if you saw an Apple ad or an Apple post on Facebook or anything and it didn't have the Apple logo on it and it didn't say Apple on it, you'd still recognize that looked like Apple. And I'm not trying to claim that anyone here needs to be as big as Apple or have that amount of brand awareness as Apple, but it is the same thing. You know, if you post regularly and it looks similar, not the same, and that's a key point, that it looks similar, you've got a consistent brand running throughout it. The idea is that people who see those posts regularly will actually be able to tell from a mile off that's a post from you without actually having to look at it and read it and go, oh, that's from HostHelp or HostHelp or Make It Clear or whoever it is. So, and to kind of just to back this up is that 88% of consumers say that the authenticity of a brand is what they're looking for, especially on social media. So just be yourself. Yourself being you or the business. Come across, don't be, a lot of people worry a lot about what they're saying, what they're doing. Don't go and be stupid, obviously, and say things that are a little bit outrageous, but be yourself. That's genuinely, that is what people are looking for online. So if you go to the next page, please. So planning ahead is the next one. You know who you're targeting, you know where you're targeting, and then you know what your content's going to be like. Now you've got to plan it ahead. One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking that social media, I don't have time for that because I've got to, I'm busy at that point, and that was when the post was going to go out. It doesn't work like that. What you need to do is plan ahead. So there are, content calendars, scheduling softwares, they're essential. A little bit of a tip is that there are, for example, ones like Hootsuite and Social Pilot and things like this, which are worth you looking into. But if you are only posting on Facebook and Instagram, then Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram combined, they have their own scheduler that you can use, and it's essential. So what you should be doing is when you sit there and you have ideas for content, start plugging it in, and you can have posts that are scheduled for the next 2 weeks, and you don't actually have to think about posting it and that you have to post it at this time and generating content. You might have an hour today where after this webinar, maybe where you have a real creative streak and you sit there and you've got 10 ideas for social media posts. Well, plug them into the scheduler, even if they're not fully formed, and then you've got the content there ahead of time. If you don't do that, then it becomes a chore that you have to sit there and force it. It's like, people have writer's block when they're reading a book. It will happen with social media content as well. So you just need to have a content calendar there that you can just plug things into whenever you need to and whenever you have the ideas, because otherwise you'll forget. I do it. I'm sure we all do it. It happens, right? That's why it's good to have a notebook or whatever next to you. Another thing is mixing the content up. So yes, we know who we're targeting. Yes, we know where we're targeting them to. That is probably isn't going to change that much, although it will over time. But you don't know, especially if you're at the start of this process, what they want to see. This is, what I thought was really good was at the start where we had to guess as to which UI do we think that which menu bar do we think that would have got the most conversions or would perform better. If you look at it, you might look at it and think that's an obvious answer, and then it turns out actually it's not, because you might have thought the one with the pictures on would perform better. It's very similar with social media as well. You know roughly what they want to see and what's going to work and what isn't, but you don't know exactly. So we'll run ads that are video ads as well as static image ads as well as a carousel ad, so there's multiple pictures, because we don't know which one's going to work best, and you have to trial these things out. If I, whilst it is a given that video content is huge at the minute, but if I said to everybody, no, don't worry about the picture ones, the video is going to perform better, I would be wrong some of the time, maybe only 20% of the time, 10% of the time, but I would be wrong some of the time. So you have to make sure that you're mixing up what you're doing through the type of content, i.e. video, pictures, whatever, but also the sorts of things: informative, fun, team photos, birthdays, whatever, FAQs, whatever it's going to be. Mix it up and look at it. You can see which posts perform better. They have big numbers on it that tell you how many likes, how many comments, how many people saw it, etc., etc. So the summary of that slide is: have fun with what you're doing, play about with trends, post things that you think you'll like. If there's a piece of content or a meme, this is obviously a huge thing, memes, they're everywhere, right? If there is a meme that everybody in the office finds hilarious and you find hilarious, then there is a good chance that other people will find it funny as well. And why not try it? Why not post it, see how it goes, and you might find it's the best post that you've ever done. often is the case, that there's that piece of content that you were thinking about doing but weren't sure, that you just thought, oh, sod it, I'll do it. That is the best performing piece of content you've ever done. It's happened to me, it's happened to clients where they've not wanted a piece of content to go out because they thought, oh, I'm not sure about that, and it turned out it was the best thing that they could have ever done, basically. So have fun with it, pretty much. If you can skip to the next slide, please. So this is kind of just a summary of this, is that blocking in your calendar some time to schedule in your posts and actually plan them out is really important. We as business owners and just people in general have a habit of wasting time on things that don't need to be so difficult. You don't need to sit there and have a whole day to plan out social media content. You can schedule an hour into your diary, and I guarantee you will come up with a load of content, and that's 2 weeks worth of content done straight away for you. Obviously there's parts of design that have to go into it, etc., but the ideas are there, and often the ideas are the hardest part of it. So if you just allocate a small amount of time to it, you know, an hour a week, and get your ideas down, it's really, really important to do. So you can go to the next slide, please. The next thing is consistency. So we kind of spoke about visual consistency earlier, but this is more about sticking to a plan. So there's two parts of that. This is the consistency of your posting. So a big no-no is don't go and post once a day for 7 days and then not post again for 4 weeks because you were really busy. Actually, that could be more damaging to you than of just doing one post per week for the next 7 weeks or something like this. The reason is that there's two parts to this, and this applies to both, is that there is a psychological part to this. So this is people. This is that, you know, people need to see you more than once. They're not just going to see something and think, oh, that's amazing, I'm sold. It doesn't work like that. You need to be regularly showing, being informative, showing that you know what you're talking about, etc., on a regular basis. But also, we are ultimately in the hands of the social media gods, and the social media gods really, really like when you post regularly. It's just a fact. So again, if you were to post, what I always advise people is don't get me wrong, it's great if you can post every day, it is, but if you can't post every day, don't try and, you know, force it or start doing it and then stop. Set yourself a goal of posting 3 times a week, or even 1 time a week, just to start off. Doing that on a regular basis is better than just randomly doing it. There's going to be some impromptu posts, and I'm not advising that you don't ever randomly slot a post in there, of course, but it is really important that you have a schedule for that. The other part of it is engagement, and this is when I tell people this, that, you know, especially people who are not particularly social media savvy, they just it doesn't compute. But essentially, the social media platforms are looking for you to not only output content on there, but also for you to use the platform like a real person. So this is, and I'm not kidding you, this is an excuse for you, and this is homework, I guess, for after this, that you can go and scroll through your Instagram, your business Instagram, and just use it like you were using your own personal social media. Like some posts, comment on some friends or business partners or business friends posts, you know, engage with people, reply to comments, follow some new people. The algorithms on social media are looking for profiles that are doing that. If you were to have 2 profiles that were brand new, one of them did no engagement whatsoever, but posted once a day, every single day for 30 days, and you had one profile that posted 3 times a week, but also did engagement on it, and they were both brand new, that profile that posted slightly less, but also engaged as well, would, without a doubt, be seen by more people, be taken better by more people, etc., etc. It is an absolute fact for sure. So like I said, it's an excuse that you can just sit there, scroll through your social media, Instagram, TikTok, whatever one it is that you got for your business, and not feel bad about it, basically. So if you can go to the next page, please. This is just something to think about here, is that you can imagine that the reason that consistency is so important is that you think about how much content there is now, just in general. Obviously, George is talking about it now. Like if you start up a business, you're essentially starting a media business as well. I mean, you have to publish content, which just means that there are unthinkable numbers of pieces of content and posts and blogs and everything. So what good is posting one or posting a few and then forgetting about it going to do? It just isn't. You have to do it regularly to be able to be seen and remembered. And if you don't do it regularly, you'll just be forgotten, because there'll be someone else who's posting more regularly than you are, putting content out more regularly than you are, and they'll favor them because they're more interesting. It's just how it works. Next page, please. So I love this part of it. Loads of people hate it. It has a real stigma to it, paid advertising. I did mention I'm going to be specifically talking about social media paid advertising on here, but there's also Google and other things that go alongside this as well. So like I say, it's got a real bad stigma, but it doesn't mean that it's any less important or vital to do, because it really, really is. So especially now compared to 5 years ago on social media, 6, 7 years ago, it is so important to run some paid ads if you want to really get some success out of it. Because again, going back to the previous point, think of how much content is out there. Think about how we're inundated with things all the time. Everybody is. You have to, posting on your profiles now isn't enough. Posting on your profiles will go to the people who follow you and like your page already, which you can of course grow organically, but it is a very limited process, because if, especially where social media has been a thing for so many years, I do, and I'm sure everyone else here does, we follow loads of people, which means you get loads of content on our profiles, which means that I'm not always going to see on my Instagram feed what Sarah's posted or what George has posted. I'm just not, because I don't see stuff all the time. So a way that they can guarantee that I see stuff if I'm their target audience is to pay for it, basically. And it's nowhere near as expensive as what people think. Google can be. Social media advertising is rather cheap for what it is, really. So what it does, the paid advertising, is it lets you put yourself in front of new people who match your criteria of interest and your persona. You can literally target them basically through social media, and it goes out to them. So it ensures that new people are going to see your content. If somebody who lives on your road could be the perfect target customer, but they've never heard of you, don't know who you are, they don't follow your page, so how would they ever see your content? Well, what you need to do is put yourself in front of them and force your way in there, and then sell yourself to them, and that's how it works. So the anecdote that I always use, because I've had it, and again everybody's had it, is that you've probably used social media yourselves, and you've been speaking to a friend about something, maybe while you were scrolling or 5 minutes earlier, and you then open up Instagram or scroll down a little bit further and you see an ad for what you were just talking about, and you sit there and you think, I'm being tracked or spied, or someone's listening to me, or that does not make sense. What that is a really, really, really well targeted or retargeted ad. It goes back again to a little bit what Sarah said about the AI side of it. AI is just ridiculous now. That's how Facebook categorizes you. This is morally, I'm not sure how I feel about this. As somebody who's helping people use paid advertising, it's an amazing thing what you can do. So to give you an example, I think it's on the slide here, that you can even target people by the age of their children on social media. So to give you a real life example of that, we've got a bubble tea client who really wants to run offers to the parents of children, so they get them to come in and have a bubble tea and this sort of stuff. So we can literally choose on Meta to target people with parents with children aged between X and Y, which is mad and scary and probably wrong on so many levels. But if you own a business, you've kind of got to make use of it, because otherwise, if you don't, your competitors will be doing it. I guarantee it. So there's a little. If you skip to the next one, there's a quote on this page here. But if you skip to the next one, the quote that the statistic was, not quote, sorry, was that 25.5% of all digital spend. Oh no, I think you've gone past. Sorry, go back. 25.5% of all digital spend. 25.5% of all digital spend will be taken by social media advertising in 2023, which just says it all, really. That's 25% of all the money that businesses are spending on their marketing is going into social media. So just get to the next one, and that's only going to get higher. You can go to the next one as well now. So at the end of the day, you have to measure your return on investment. If there's not a return on investment, then you'll be looking at it and thinking, what's the point of doing it? And I totally agree. What is the point of doing it if you're not benefiting from doing it? What's really important is that you know what you're measuring as well, because there are all different kinds of return on investment. So most platforms like the Meta, like Facebook and Instagram, and most of them allow you to implement tracking between your social media platform and where you're sending people. So be that a product page or your service website or wherever it's going to be. You can then track what people are doing and who's converting and who's buying. So you can know that if you sell a product, for example, you sold X amount of your product via this ad specifically. So you are able to directly track a return on investment like that, which is great. And there's no issues with that at all. But there is also a forgotten return on investment with social media, which is brand awareness. And people do forget about this, because just because somebody doesn't buy something today or tomorrow or next week or next month doesn't mean they're never going to buy it. This again falls back to how much content is on social media. You know, I think the old marketing saying is that you have to see something 6 or 7 times before you take action on it. It's probably way higher than that now, purely because there's so much of it. You know, I guarantee you that once everybody leaves this webinar, I guarantee you that it will take you a minute, not even, to have been shown some form of ad, be that online, by email, on the internet. They're just everywhere. So you have to remember that if you spend money on your social media and there's not an immediate return on investment that day, that week, that month, it doesn't mean that things down the line won't come from it, because it absolutely will, and you're reinforcing your brand. And again, this is a statistic to reinforce that, is that 83% of people say that it's really, really hard to measure what return on investment you get from social media. However, the companies that are using social media end up generating 2 times more leads than the companies that aren't, which immediately tells you that just because they're not necessarily getting the return on investment there and then, they're generating the leads, they're generating the interest. You know, these people might not want to buy it now. A good example is a roof cleaner. You know, I see a roof cleaning ad, I think, oh, my roof is really dirty, I should probably get that cleaned, but now's not the best time. You know, we've got Christmas coming up, whatever it's going to be, you know, oh, we'll do that next year. I've seen it. That was the ad that kind of told me I need to get it done. I'll remember it, and if that company keeps advertising, it will come to the point where next year I'll go, all right, okay, I've got to get it done now. Keep showing up. Let's give them a message. Just get it done. And that does happen, and it will happen. And I'm sure that everybody here has done it. Just because somebody clicks on an ad and then leaves the ad doesn't mean they're not interested. What it means is they got distracted, forgot about it, said, oh yeah, I'll look at that tomorrow, whatever it's going to be. And I think that's really, really important for people to remember. So if you skip to the next one, and skip to the next one as well, because I've pretty much touched on that in what I've just said there. So to kind of wrap this up, I think we've got a couple of slides left now, and this is really important. So social media is incredibly effective. It's vital at this point. Again, back to what George said, if you start a business now, you're also starting a media business. If you start a media business, you know, you have to generate content. Where are you going to put that content? Social media. You ultimately have to do that at this point in time. But one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is to just exclusively think that social media is this godsend that's going to fix everything and run your business, because it's not that easy. If it was that easy, everybody would just do it themselves, and they'd post on Facebook, they'd run a couple of ads, and they'd have a successful business. What's really important is that you know, title aside, the right combo is that you get the right combination of advertising. So what I mean by that is that you can use information that you've gathered from your social media ads or from learning about your customers through social media, and you can implement that into your SEO. You can implement that into your Google ads and your keyword searches and all of these other kinds of things. That's something that is forgotten and has to be remembered, because, you know, ultimately it will perform better. Your social media ads will perform better if you're also leveraging it with other things that you're doing. So if you skip to the final slide, businesses that have combined their social media campaigns with Google ads and SEO see a 50-75% increase in their engagement and conversions compared to if they did not. That is not a coincidence. If you just run social media campaigns, you could be incredibly successful, But what I would say to somebody who does do that is, if you ran social media campaigns and you ran Google Ads and other, whatever other form of advertising was appropriate for your business, you would see an increase in your conversions through those social media campaigns, because you're also advertising on other platforms. So that's it from me. Obviously, thank you to everyone for listening. I think we've got a little bit of time now for some questions, if there is any. If not, then I guess it means we've done a really good job of explaining. So
Thanks, Joe. So if you do have any questions, you can pop them in the chat, maybe. Just while anybody's typing anything in, Joe, they're going to be removing kind of cookies from websites. How is that going to affect tracking, do you think? What impact is that going to have?
What I would say to that is that I think no matter what, these social media platforms are always going to have a way that they are going to track what you're doing. I think that there's been a lot of things that have cropped up over the past maybe sort of 5 years. But they have made tracking more difficult already for iOS devices through Meta and this sort of stuff. I think my personal opinion on that is I probably wouldn't worry too much, because there's always going to be your data. Our data is the most valuable thing on the planet. There's always going to be a way to monetize that data, I think, anyway. I might be naive to that, but we'll see, I guess.
Let's see if there's anything coming in. Only saved up one question.
I have a question for you, Sarah.
Okay, yeah.
Because I mentioned, I referred back to your thing where it was like you got the menus and one of them had pictures and one of them didn't.
And the icons and stuff, yeah.
I bet everybody guessed A. I even did it. I thought there's, obviously that's going to be, and I was wrong. And obviously what I say is that, don't ever trust that, you have to trial things to know. Why is that, you think? I know you said that simplicity is a thing, but, I think common sense would be like, well, if it's got a picture of it, a picture speaks 1,000 words, so it's easier to tell what that category does without it, without having to read the. Why do you think that is?
It's probably just the context in which you're looking at it in. So, because I'm asking you to look at 2 designs and say which is the easiest to use, but actually the test is, somebody thinking, I need, I don't know, let's say it was plumbing from the menu, and finding plumbing, and actually because there's less noise on the second one, the test isn't based on kind of opinion. It's based on who gets who clicks, finds what they need to. So I think it's just about the kind of context, I think, that you look at that. And I think icons can be a really great tool, but what we always say is just try and limit them to either kind of something to kind of help add context. Don't ever let them stand on their own unless they're a search icon, unless they're a magnifying glass and I don't know, a cog. I don't know. There's about 3 or 4 icons that are just absolutely universal, right? But apart from that, I always say kind of always add context to iconography. And if you don't need it, don't include it. If you're thinking about different geographies and things, it doesn't necessarily work. George, how long would you say you should run SEO before you're going to see any results?
I normally say you should see some improvement in one of your metrics, which is like trust score or a keyword within at least 90 days. You should start seeing some results. That's kind of from the clients that we've worked with. That's what we've been seeing. Is at least getting you ranking on first page during that time, or improving your trust score, or getting you backlinks is a given. But you should start seeing some results, some traffic improvement within that period of time, definitely. Yeah.
Good.
I'll say so.
I suppose, Joe, last one for you is kind of, what's your favourite social platform and why?
It depends. It depends what if you're asking. If
what
you're asking personally, so my personal favourite social platform, if I'm in the evening browsing, is X or Twitter, which people often think is an unusual one. But if I'm talking for business, probably Instagram. Instagram is probably the most go-to, covers most audiences. It's the most general one that you can use. So probably business, Instagram, personal, X.
X. And do you think Threads will take over X?
Not
No.
a chance. Never in a million years. Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, we'll land on that, which is documented. But oh, sorry, George.
One thing I want to ask Joe is, obviously I've been seeing one thing that Snapchat has introduced that I think is quite good is that people that's doing video content for podcasts, etc., they're able to now put some of their content on Snapchat because you can do the longer stories now. I realize that that's getting quite popular. They've removed the subscription side of things in terms of subscribing to certain people, and they've kind of made it a bit more diverse, like an explore page almost underneath your followers. What do you feel like? Do you feel like that could benefit businesses in any way that have podcasts and things like that?
So it's actually a really good point, because, and maybe something I should have mentioned in my talk as well, is that, so for Snapchat, I would almost categorize there's tiers of social medias. So you've got your top tier social medias, which are Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and things like this, and TikTok, I guess. And then you've got your ones that are underneath it that maybe sort of like Pinterest and Snapchat and things like this. So do I think that that's a good thing for businesses that have podcasts? 100% it is. I think it's, it's, if there's another platform that you can publish your content on, there's going to be some people that have a preference to use that one rather than another one. And if you can put it onto both of them, then why not? What I would say though is that sometimes people can get carried away with all of the features that all of these platforms have, and there's all of these different ones that you can do similar sort of things on. Sometimes what is best is that because if you focused on the primary ones and then trickle your way down into other ones. I tell you what would be extremely useful, and I don't know if this is a tool or not, which I should probably look into, is if there were a way that you could publish onto the Snapchat feature that you mentioned, as well as Instagram, as well as this, then why would you not, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, guys. So we'll probably just wrap it up there, unless there's any more kind of points from anyone.
Yeah,
no, I'm good.
No.
Happy.
Great. All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. We'll send a bit of a wrap up around, and I think the video will be available as well for people to kind of look at, and also we'll send the slide deck. So, so our contact details at the end. Do drop us a line if there's any other questions, or follow us on social or LinkedIn. We'll send that out as part of the follow-up email as well. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your hopefully sunny day. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you later, everyone. Bye-bye.